listening to Planet Vero Radio. I am Cindy Schwartz. We are broadcast on iHeartMedia and also podcast on Spreaker. This is the Patient Partners Show, where we talk about things that possibly help patients, stories that have happened to patients, and ways to go about all of this stuff that we've learned. So we're the harm patients. I have on Skype with me my co-host Jeannie Roller. She's in Indiana. Today I just want to start the show off, Jeannie, and I want to make a note to the audience that when we're patients, you and I and your husband and other people that we've had on the show, we're harm patients, things happen to us. The first thing that we all heard from the administration and from the doctors and whatever that we went back to, the facilities that we had our care at, they told us this didn't happen. Patients aren't treated like that. What you all are telling us, that didn't happen. We don't do that. You are not, traumatized. You were not abused. You are not this, not that, not this, not that. So I say, okay, we've all listened to that for years. Misty Roberts at patientmodesty.org talks about it a lot, too, on her website and also on Facebook. And so I want to bring these two legal cases to the forefront of two more legal cases, one that is in the works and the other one that has been settled. And it deals with the University of Michigan male sports students that were sexually abused, that they heard too, no, this didn't happen to you. Our doctors don't do that to people. That case was settled at $480 million. So I'm thinking that they probably gave the money because something did happen. And also the Ohio State University case that is being litigated now, that will probably be settled for some astronomical amount of money. And it's not about the money at all. It's about saying, yes, this happened. Yes, this happened. So I just want to say that on this show because we listen to that over and over again from our state attorney generals, from Joint Commission, from the doctors, from our Department of Health, mine in Florida, yours in Indiana. It goes on and on and on from the admin at the hospitals that we were at. No, this didn't happen. Well, little by little, these specks of cases, and I'm not applauding this because I don't want anyone to be abused like this, but it is coming out into the forefront that, yes, these doctors have abused us patients.
Right. And, we talk quite a bit about the medical personnel exposing patients unnecessarily. We know it's not only harmful to your mental health, but we know it's harmful to your physical well-being because you can get hypothermia from being exposed.
Mm-hmm. So you're talking about physically exposed. The patient has no gown, no blanket. They always say, we give you, all these warming blankets. Yeah, those didn't exist. And that's what you're talking about.
Right. I mean, you have experienced that. My husband has experienced that. And we've talked about patients getting medical PTSD from this. Mm-hmm. We've talked about the unjustifiable reasons that medical personnel give for treating patients as though they're not worthy of having bodily respect, but yet it keeps happening. Mm-hmm. This week, I have run into a couple of different stories. An article I was reading, which I will post on the website, gave an example of an elderly lady in the hospital who needed an injection. The female nurse came into her room and said she needed to give the injection, but as she was reaching for the blanket, she said only this time it would be in her abdomen. And the old lady just clutched the blanket so the nurse couldn't yank it back. The nurse told the woman to cooperate, but the patient didn't, and the nurse had other patients to see, so she just noted in the patient's MR that she was uncooperative and difficult, refused the shot. Mm-hmm. Now, another example, I belong to a blog, and the man is pretty well educated. He's been fighting for his bodily rights for 40 years. However, during a recent hospitalization, he too fell for being unnecessarily exposed again after even telling them and having a note in his medical records at that hospital that he required medical modesty. I don't like the term modesty because to me it implies there is some mental issue on the patient's part rather than it being the responsibility of the medical provider to respect each and every patient's right to bodily dignity.
So
However,
go ahead.
Well, once his mind cleared from all sedation, it was a very different story.
Mm-hmm.
Nurses would come to examine his wounds, and he would reach for the blanket before they could, or else they would have exposed him unnecessarily. But he controlled it by holding onto the blanket and only exposing what needed to be examined. Mm-hmm. This happened time and time again, he said, after the procedure. So, I mean, these two stories drive home that there is a broader issue out there, that many people don't talk about it because they don't know that this type of exposure does not need to be done. Mm-hmm. Most people I've talked to do not realize this. They're not happy about it, but they don't know that this isn't necessary.
Well, that's the thing. You bring up a key point. We don't know. So we trust that this is, going to be done the right way. And then when it happens to you, you're just like, I didn't sign on for any of this stuff. Where is this coming from? And so, again, we've talked about it over and over again. When you have doctors that can perform and medical personnel that can perform these same procedures without doing that, where's the dynamic with this? I mean, if you can do it successfully without doing this to a patient, why is it being done? And why are we sitting here talking about it? Because it shouldn't have, across the board, it shouldn't be done. It should be, and I'm with you, the modesty thing that makes it like we have a problem, like, we're whatever. We have issues that are so insurmountable, these medical people can't work with us because, oh, look what you've brought us. Look at these problems you've brought us. That's not true at all. There's no way in any rationalization that this stuff has to be done. And we've had doctors over and over again on the podcast that I've posted that say, you're right, Cindy, you're right, Jeannie. And I mean, we don't do this.
Right.
So why are other people in the medical community doing this? And then when you do it, why are you arguing with us saying that this is set in stone because it's germs, it's this, it's that, it's procedure? And it doesn't have to be procedure. And again, for the umpteenth time, if that's what you're going to do, then legally you should tell us so we can go somewhere else. But you're not going to because you don't want to lose the dollars.
Right. And I've had people ask me, well, why is it so important that you're not exposed unnecessarily? Well, there are a couple of reasons that come to the top of the list for me, that there is no justifiable reason for medical personnel to believe it is their right to expose you just because you are a patient. Mm-hmm. The other is always not so obvious, and that is both of these people that I talked about, two different stories, different places, different times, are survivors of sexual abuse. The male I told the story about is a survivor of sexual abuse from his childhood, and the guilty party was a female nurse. Mm-hmm. So there are things that patients bring into the mix that these people have no clue about, and they traumatize people. So, and that goes on to beg the question of, how do people like my husband, who has suffered sexual abuse, assault from the hands of medical providers, or anyone who's been a victim of sexual assault, deal with medical encounters? It is very tricky.
It is tricky. And the other thing I'll say too is, sometimes when you tell them this stuff, they disregard it.
Right.
They disregard it. And like you said, that gentleman that you talked about, his story, and a lot of these people want to share their stories, but they don't want to necessarily be interviewed on live radio and live podcasts. So hence why we tell the stories, and, they don't want their names given. So I understand all of that. It's just, it's more abuse. And I get that. So what do we do? I mean, we tell them that this is what's going on, and then they revert back, oh, well, you come in, you're damaged.
Right. Well, and my husband, I can talk about him because I know his story the best. He had a traumatic experience, even though we told them that it needed to be noted in his medical records, and they said they would.
And we've got like 15 seconds left, Jeannie. So I want to give the website too, yeah. So just the website for more information, listeners, patientrightsinfo.com, and you can email us at info@patientrightsinfo.com. So if you want to ask us a question, go ahead and ask us. We'll do the best we can to answer, and also the best information that we can give you. You've been listening to another segment of Patient Partners on Planet Vero Radio. Please stay tuned.